In Amazing Spider-Man number 4 from Marvel Comics, we find the wall crawler struggling to stay in the moment while he wrestles with hallucinogens poisoning his mind. Can he fight off a team-up between Hobgoblin and Itsy Bitsy? Let's find out in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. Let's just get this out of the way right now. Joe Kelly, who is the new ongoing writer for Amazing Spider-Man, is just not cutting the mustard. I'm sorry, Joe, if you hear this, it's not good enough. After 63 years of character development and history, there's no point and no value spending multiple issues exploring Peter's brief, rebellious period as a young teenager, especially when the supernatural developments around Itsy Bitsy and Hobgoblin and whatever his plan is so clunky, awkward, and underdeveloped. Joe Kelly is just wasting too much time. Let me tell you what I mean in the pros and cons section. Let's start with the positives and what's great about Amazing Spider-Man number 4. The bright spot in Joe Kelly's script is the unrelenting sense of urgency and tension that holds your attention throughout the entire book. Kelly grips you when it's unclear how Spidey is going to overcome these false memories, maybe true memories, and hallucinations to avoid death at the hands of two supervillains working together. Plus, there's a call to the Justice Department that sets off a race because the Hobgoblin wants to prevent the federales from getting involved in his plan. So now we have a ticking clock, lots of urgency, lots of fast-paced energy and action. That's good. We want more of that. And that brings us to the negatives with Amazing Spider-Man number 4. Spidey's hallucinations about his rebellious years may or may not be reliable, and they are kind of novel, maybe somewhat interesting in a very curiosity sort of way, but they don't add anything to his character that we haven't seen before, and they're not pertinent to the plot. It's as if Joe Kelly wants to elevate this notion that Peter wasn't a perfect kid in his teenage years, and okay, fine, great, that's wonderful, but that has nothing to do with what's going on in the comic right now. It has nothing to do with Hobgoblin or Itsy Bitsy or whatever this plan is to poison the citizens of New York. You are taking up at least half of the comic with those scenes, those flashbacks, those montages, and they don't matter to anything that's going on. Let me put a bit of a finer point on it. We know at the end of the previous issue, and it's reinforced in this issue, the synopsis we'll get to in a minute, that Hobgoblin is planning to infect the citizens of New York was something that he's put into this Queen's Cola drink. But that's all we know. And after you read this entire issue, that information hasn't changed, updated, or modified in any substantial way. In other words, Joe Kelly takes between a third to a half of this comic with all these hallucinations and memories which may be faulty, just to kind of underscore the fact that Peter maybe feels a little bit bad about how rebellious he was when he was like 14 or 15 or 13. But it has no bearing on anything. It doesn't matter. Joe Kelly should have taken those extra pages, put more development into this awkward, clunky plot from Hobgoblin, and made it feel a little bit more like it was thought out and thought through. Instead, we get a lot of time wasted on nothing. Let's switch over and talk about the art for a second. We've got Pepe Larraz, who's on pencils and inks, and I gotta say, it's kind of a benefit to this comic to have Pepe Larraz on it, but it's also a downside for one obvious reason. It's too good. It is too good for this story. Larraz's dynamic, explosive art is better than anyone has a right to expect. It looks amazing, no pun intended, as the plot flip-flops between these blue-toned montages of memories that sort of act like bubbles and are swirling in and out during the hallucination periods. And then you move over and you get this really hard-hitting set of visuals for Spidey when he's fighting against Hobgoblin and a little bit later Itsy Bitsy. Every superhero comic should look this good, even though the script is just not great. The art is definitely working overtime to try and compensate for it. Let's move over to the recap. In Amazing Spider-Man number 3, the wall crawler escaped Itsy Bitsy's murderous clutches when it turns out Itsy Bitsy has, I guess, romantic feelings for her quote-unquote father, which is weird and creepy and gross, and I'm not sure what Joe Kelly was going for there, but it was just weird. Later, Norman Osborn and Peter Parker deduced, somehow through a very loose connection of ideas, that Rhino became sick after drinking large amounts of this product called Queen's Cola. It's a local brand of soda. When Spider-Man went to the Queen's Cola distribution facility, he was attacked by Hobgoblin. And now we continue with the action in Amazing Spider-Man number 4. The issue begins with Brian Nearing and Myra Osmani Milton, Miss Ohm if you prefer, discussing Peter Parker's poor attendance as a new employee at RAND. Miss Ohm demands that Peter be fired, but Brian explains Peter's attendance is not his fault because he's drugged with something infused in Queen's Cola. Remember, Peter brought a can to Brian last issue to examine. The discovery prompts Brian and Miss Ohm to call the Justice Department because they believe some sort of conspiracy is afoot. Meanwhile, Hobgoblin attacks Spidey at the Queen's Cola plant. Spidey has a really tough time focusing because the drugs pull him into a string of memories and hallucinations about his rebellious struggles as a young teenager. Aunt May and Uncle Ben were at a loss as to how to respond to Peter's behavior, and it's very typical type of teenager stuff. He's falling in with the other boys, he's drinking alcohol and getting drunk and doing all those kinds of things that you'd expect a teenager his age to do. In the end, May and Ben choose to love Peter no matter what he's going through. And part of that is the struggle of Peter wrestling with the death of his parents and being under the guardianship of his aunt and uncle, even though they're not really his parents. In the now or in the moment, Spidey barely survives Hobgoblin's attacks when Itsy Bitsy shows up. She's got news from a informant or a contact inside the Justice Department that Rand tipped off the agency and that they need to do something about it before the whole operation is exposed, whatever it happens to be. Hobgoblin gives Itsy Bitsy strict orders to kill Spider-Man while he flies off to kill the whistleblowers at Rand. If he doesn't do it, because this is the third time he's asked her to do such a thing, if she doesn't do it, she knows she's going to be the one that gets killed. The issue ends with Spidey somehow defeating Itsy Bitsy, but not quick enough to stop Hobgoblin from flying off to Rand. Final thoughts: what do we think about Amazing Spider-Man number 4? It has great art, it has some great action, but it wastes a lot of time on flashbacks about Peter's youth for no earthly reason whatsoever. Joe Kelly's clunky script about a hobgoblin plot to poison New York has some merit, but he's not giving it enough time to develop and isn't focused enough to stay on it long enough to let it play out. Conversely, you get Pepe Larraz's art, which is spectacular and honestly too good for this story. Therefore, Amazing Spider-Man number 4 from Marvel Comics earns a 5.5 out of 10. You're probably saying, well, if I hated it that much, why is the score as high as it is, even though that's not a great score? It's almost all because of the art. Pepe Larraz's art looks amazing in this issue, so if you're just in it for the art, pick it up. If you're in it for story, you're going to be very disappointed. But maybe that's just me. I want to know your opinions about this. Let me know in the comments section. Am I being too hard on this series? Am I not giving Joe Kelly enough of a chance? I mean, we're on issue 4 by now, so you should at least get a flavor for what he's trying to accomplish here. Is it better than I'm giving it credit for? Let me know in the comments section. So, thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more reviews just like this one.